Welcome and thank you for joining us today for this webinar, which we're holding with our knowledge partner, IBM. I'm Marta Kozlowska, Development Director at the Energy Institute. Many of you know the Energy Institute well, but for those of you who don't, we're an independent network of professionals from across the entire energy system. And our aim is to bring together expertise so that energy can be better understood, managed, and valued. And amongst the others, we do this by convening and facilitating knowledge sharing, such as this webinar today. In this way, working with our members, we help the industry address urgent challenges. The COVID pandemic has severely impacted the industry, and our speakers today will discuss how organizations are dealing with business continuity, what measures are being taken to protect the safety of people, assets, and data, while scaling up remote operations, and how digitalisation can protect operations and help recovery. And now I'd like to welcome all our panelists, and in particular, I have pleasure in introducing the chair, past president and currently trustee of the Energy Institute, Malcolm Brinded. Malcolm brings with him a wealth of experience and insight from a global career spanning nearly 40 years at Shell, including a decade on the main board as executive director. He is a fellow of not just the EI, but many other esteemed institutions, and he is deeply involved in this work. We're very pleased to have him here today. Thank you and welcome. Malcolm, over to you.
Thanks. Thank you, Marta. And it's a great pleasure to be here and to welcome everyone to this Energy Institute webinar on conducting business during COVID-19 and beyond. Of course, we're all not sure when beyond will really come into play, with the world today passing that terrible toll of 1 million deaths from COVID-19 and the case count still rising in many countries. And the global economy has also been dealt a shock, with the likely impacts in terms of companies, jobs, and whole sectors absolutely, in a way, far-reaching and not fully manifest, as they've been cushioned by government bailouts, which are not long-term sustainable. But in what can sometimes seem pretty gloomy, it is to me remarkable how businesses, including many businesses in the energy sector, have found new ways to operate more effectively than ever, many of which are clearly going to transform permanently how their business is done. And though energy companies are wrestling in the short term with the biggest downturn in global energy demand in 70 years, this has also clearly accelerated their recognition that the energy transition is not just about the future, but very much about the here and now, and that they need to accelerate their own transition. Today, we have a really brilliant and diverse panel with terrific global experience to discuss how both the world of work and the world of energy are being transformed. Our panel is Michael Biermann, CIO of Ørsted, Tove Lunde, the head of safety, security and sustainability at Equinor, Ilya Bachenko, the lead digital product manager for assets and projects at Shell, and Sonia van Ballaert, global client director, IBM Global Markets. I'm going to introduce them in turn before they speak. They'll each speak for about 5 minutes, and then we'll turn to panel discussion, addressing some questions from me, and of course, the questions that you can submit, as Marta has explained. So first up, we have Michael Biermann, CIO at Ørsted. He's CIO of a company that is a world leader now in offshore wind, and recently ranked the most sustainable company in the world, where Michael has been driving the company's digital transformation since 2016. He heads the IT department of approximately 800 employees across their worldwide network. He was previously the CIO at PFA Pension, and prior to that, built his career with IT at KMD, one of Denmark's largest IT development companies. He's an MSc in computer science from the University of Copenhagen. He's also a member of the board of Energy Cert, a centre raising cybersecurity focus across the whole Danish energy sector. Michael, over to you.
Thanks a lot, Malcolm. Thanks a lot, and hello, everybody. Well, Ørsted is really a big enterprise. It's not the biggest in the world, but we are trying to grow. And I'm saying that because we're also turning into a global enterprise. And earlier this year, when COVID hit us, we really figured out what it means to be global and how vulnerable you really are. As many other companies, we activated our corporate crisis management organization, and which also I'm a part of still. I'd say one of the points that I would like to make here is that for our company at least, and I think it goes for the sector as such, the COVID-19 situation is treated as a crisis. It's a number of concrete incidents and tangible issues that we need to deal with, and we're doing that. Depending, of course, on how long we will sit in this crisis, it will also turn into perhaps a new way of looking at the world, and we can get back to that. But if you look at some of the incidents and the tangible issues, I mean, all companies had to figure out how to move people to homes, and we also did that with all the stuff that we needed to figure out. Physical equipment going into people's homes, but also securing the lines and stuff like that. Today it seems trivial. It's only been 6 months or something like that. But today, when we move people to their houses, it seems like technology that we have had for a long time, and to some extent it is. But now it's not really a tech issue any longer. So moving people to home was first phase, but we've quickly realized that the real issues had to do with moving people around across borders and from offices and into the assets. What we do right now is move from strictly European footprint into the US, into Asia also. And the way we do that is also by moving some of our very skilled European skills into the world. And obviously you can imagine that using people as bridgeheads into these new markets has been very cumbersome during the last months. So that has been one of the things that we have learned. Right now we treat it like incidents. We need to figure out how, but could it in the end also means that we will think differently about how we organize ourselves? Probably it will. Other tangible examples. We have vessels going forth and back from the harbor and to the assets that sits in the ocean, sometimes very large assets sitting very, very deep into the ocean. So what happens when you are exposed to regulations on social distancing? Well, what happens is that you have less capacity on these vessels. Again, it's just sort of a problem that needs to be fixed. We are engineers after all. So what do? You put in more ships and you fix it like that. And luckily we can do that. We also have people trapped in different ways. People trapped in their home countries, for instance. In Malaysia, we have a big office for IT. We have a couple of hundred people sitting there, but most of them, or half of them actually, are not from Malaysia. They're from all over the region in Asia. And some of them were at their home countries at the time where the world locked down, and they have been trapped for many weeks and even months in their home countries. Of course, having the possibility of working from home, but in the end, we also need to help them get back to the office space. Finally, I want to mention also a situation where we have people trapped in the work site, because we also do building of large constructions, and some of it is done at a yard in Singapore, where something like, I think it's 1,600 people are working on the yard. And a lot of them are also people who has taken up a job, but doesn't live at the yard, obviously, but they sleep there in dormitories, which is not really designed to stand the pressure of a pandemic, you could imagine. So also here we see the major construction site. They have been locked down for several months, delaying some of the projects that we are running. And obviously also creating a bad situation for employees. A lot of tangible, concrete stuff to be handled. I think we are quite successful to do that, and we can also talk about the ingenuity that seems to come out of it. But in the end, I think also being part of the energy industry, we need to acknowledge that we are not in aviation or driving restaurants or hotels or travel. We are in the energy industry with a certain resilience to it, and for me, even the green energy is something that, even though we might see some delays in political processes these days, there will be a lot of work for us in the future for sure. So even in the light of COVID-19, the forecasts for my company at least are unaltered, and we're also quite optimistic about the future. Thank you, Malcolm.
Thank you very much, Michael. It's good to be reminded it is an operational crisis in so many situations for assets and construction sites and so forth. But also, as you say, to recognise that we are a fortunate sector in many ways. Next up, we have Tove Lunde. Tove is the head of safety, security and sustainability in Equinor New Energy Solutions. And Equinor today operates in more than 30 countries. Of course, remains a major investor in oil and gas with some terrific new projects under development, but also has plans and activities to become a very major offshore wind player with some 4 to 6 gigawatts in operation by the mid-20s. Tove holds an MSc in Marine Engineering and Naval Architecture, and after 17 years with ExxonMobil, she joined Equinor in 2007, where roles have included VP of Offshore Modifications, and since 2017, Head of Safety, Security and Sustainability for New Energy Solutions, supporting offshore wind, solar and storage value chains. In January 2020, she was elected chair of G+, and G+ is the global offshore wind health and safety organization, which I am proud to say is very closely supported by the Energy Institute. Tove, over to you.
Thank you, Malcolm, and thanks everyone for joining. After 6 months of COVID now, I think we can agree that the world will never be the same as when we come out in the other end. It will shape the way we work and the way we do business, how we think about travel, and how we relate and interact to each others. It will leapfrog the digital transformation and disrupt some businesses and boost others, just like Malcolm touched upon. And we might see greater solidarity in the world, but unfortunately also increased social inequality. The poorer will take the hardest hit also during COVID. Understanding this picture and trying to predict what the world might look like post-COVID will be key to handle the crisis beyond the immediate response required to safeguard personnel, assets, and the society at large. But a crisis also offers opportunities for improvements and changes in the following. And in the following, I would like to share with you some key learnings that we have had as an organization when it comes to business continuity and building resilience, the massive need for information and use of simple tools to solve it, and finally, the optionality created for new ways of working. Within business continuity, we have seen that scenario thinking as a key part of business continuity planning has been used widely by both companies and governments to define longer-term impacts on businesses, economies, states, and societies. And in Equinor, we have developed 2 scenarios, an optimistic case and a worst case. These scenarios were developed looking at the best and the worst possible outcome along 4 key factors considered important for the development of the crisis. Medical being one of these. For instance, how the virus develop and if there will be a vaccine or not will obviously have an impact on people's health risk and our ability to conduct business. Can we travel or not in the longer term perspective? And what implications will that have to our business? Identifying and analyzing implications of the worst case to our business have helped us put in place tangible short-term and long-term actions to mitigate the effects and build resilience in our business. Living through this unprecedented and lengthy situation with rapid changes and the detrimental effects that we've seen worldwide has created uncertainty and a massive need for information in our organization. And the potential then of self-serving tools off the shelf, such as Power BI, to visualize large amounts of data and provide dashboards has proven immense and has helped raise the situational awareness in our company and enable informed decision-making. Finally, home officing and travel restrictions have unlocked new and flexible ways of working. The change to home office overnight almost suddenly made all of us into digital ninjas and opened up for a whole new world of flexibility when it comes to where many of us can work in the future. Further, when traveling was no longer an option, it was amazing to find out how much could actually be done with innovative and alternative solutions from anywhere connected, that be the home, the office, or even from cabins around the country of Norway. In this period, we as a company have conducted a first ever completely online offshore wind consultation process in the UK. We carry out audits and verification digitally. We conduct AGSE inspections at construction yards or operational sites using digital tools and videos. And we even meet our investors and negotiate contracts and partnerships with no physical meetings. And going forward, there is a huge potential to rethink our expectations and assumptions about what requires physical presence and what does not. However, I think we should not forget that physical meetings and presence are crucial for building relations and creating teams. And we have seen signs in our organization that for some, home officing in times of COVID has increased the physical and mental health stress. So opportunities always need to be balanced with the risk in it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tove. And you're right. It's great. I like the point about using scenario thinking to really help you unlock how you've thought your way through it. But you're also right at the end there to remind us of how it's not equal for everyone. And we'll come back on that point. For some people, this has been a major boon in how they work. And for others, it brings huge physical and mental health strains. Thank you, Tove. Next up is Ilya Burchenko, lead digital product manager for assets and projects at Shell. Shell produces about 3% of the world's energy, was a sector leader in setting their game-changing goal of net zero emissions by 2050. And that includes the Scope 3 emissions of their customers. Ilya's primary responsibility is to help all RDS assets and projects with their digitalization journey. He joined Shell in 1998, has worked predominantly in the upstream, including as production performance and benchmarking manager, business advisor to the Europe EVP, and has also worked in joint ventures in Brunei and Russia. He has a PhD in geoengineering, and amazingly, he is apparently the author of more than 100 patents. Well, over to you, Ilya.
Thank you, Malcolm. That was a long time ago. So first of all, I would like to thank Energy Institute for organizing this webinar and my fellow panelists for sharing their views on such an important topic. As a few of them already mentioned, COVID-19 has disrupted the world in ways that many of us will thankfully only experience once in our lifetime. The consequences of corona crisis are enormous. First and foremost, it's a humanitarian tragedy. More than 33 million infected and more than 1 million people have died. This crisis also has a huge impact on economies, companies, and people's livelihood. Most companies had to adapt quickly. At Shell, we introduced the concept of care, continuity, and cash. We had to take measures to protect our people and our business too. Care, first and foremost, ensuring our people are safe, protected, and cared for, but also beyond that, ensuring we continue to support the communities, customers, governments, and wider society. Of course, continuity of our operations as we provide energy and products that society needs during the pandemic and post the pandemic. We are continuing to operate, invest, and produce wherever it makes sense. Cash. Shell wants to continue as an enterprise focused on our goal to thrive in the energy business and ensuring energy transition. We can only do that if, as a company, we still generate sufficient cash to pave the way to that transition. We do see the other side of the pandemic, especially in my area of digitalization. According to Forbes, the last 6 months alone have produced more digital transformation than the last decade. Digital technology becomes a critical enabler for business continuity. Restricted travel, no problem. Remote inspection is eliminating the need for travel. We have inspectors completing safety rounds from the comfort of the kitchen table, assisted by robots. These robotic experts assist technicians by looking over their shoulders thanks to augmented reality embedded in their helmets. These actions are more than initiatives to ensure business continuity through the crisis. They are opportunities to work more safely and efficiently, to further build resilient operating models, and to optimize cost. COVID-19 forced us to change our behavior, but the constraints of lockdown accelerated the opening of minds to new technology and new ways of working. Businesses today are eager to implement AI solutions like predictive maintenance and production optimization to generate more cash quickly. Our collaboration with Microsoft and C3.ai allows us to pull in over 10 billion data points each week from our facilities. Today, we are monitoring over 2,500 pieces of equipment using machine learning algorithms across more than 20 assets in upstream, downstream manufacturing, and integrated gas. Other areas where we see an increased uptake are data platforms and lately digital twin. Our collaboration with Cosberg Digital in developing digital twins brings in a new era of visually interacting with data and models at the asset, equipment, and component level. Digital twins drive digital transformation of our assets by enabling remote operations, automation, and significantly improved collaboration. These digital twins support our frontline operators to better leverage insights from big data, transforming ways of working to unlock value and increase resilience in the changing business environment. In conclusion, the world is going through a difficult crisis, but digitalization helps people, societies, and companies to get through it and to be ready for the life after COVID-19. Thank you.
I want to hear more about digital twins, but I think what you also highlighted earlier was that the way this has accelerated opening of minds. It's an interesting cultural journey. That's something that companies have been trying to make this change, and there are so many internal barriers. And from a cultural point of view, I hope everyone will start to look at themselves and ask, why did we as leaders not realize this could have been done pre-COVID, and we could have had a much more significant change in our business than we did have? And it's needed a crisis to unlock that potential. Thank you, Ilya. We'll come back and speak later. Our last speaker is Sonia van Ballaert, IBM Global Markets Global Client Director for one of IBM's top account in the energy sector and an expert on the energy sector. She's also responsible for the development of IBM's sustainability solutions in chemicals, petroleum and industrial products industries, where IBM particularly focuses on helping clients in the sector towards net zero by building digital backbones for their decarbonisation efforts and by creating ecosystem platforms to support their sustainability goals. Sonia holds a PhD in humanities from the University of California in Berkeley, and prior to IBM was at PwC as a management consulting partner. And I am delighted to repeat that IBM is the EI's knowledge partner and to thank them for sponsoring and supporting today's event. Sonia, over to you.
Thank you, Malcolm, for that introduction and fascinating presentations by the previous speakers. I'm hoping to build on that. So I think we heard from Michael that one of the first elements of resiliency is obviously the resiliency of the IT systems, because we realized for the first time ever, probably across the board, that without our IT infrastructure, without our PCs, without our networks, none of this, in COVID times would work. So the amazing thing, I think, from the IBM company is not only that we had to take care of our own people and move globally in 170 countries, every single person to the home to keep them safe, but also at the same time, we needed to make sure that the operational systems of our customers that we are oftentimes maintaining or hosting or servicing in one way or another, that they too were kept safe and resilient and operating. And amazingly, all of this really did happen, and we didn't actually see any breakdowns, and life continued as if normal. But this was a major stress test, I would say, on that part of our resiliency. And then, of course, some more stress testing started happening when it turned out that in terms of cyber resiliency, we also needed to step up our game, because we know from our data that the attacks on systems actually increased during COVID times by 2,000%. And these attacks are of all kinds. They have to do also a lot with attacking people in their homes as they work, really attacking their innocence, in terms of believing phishing emails or things like that. So that actually increased the threat on our systems greatly, and made us ramp up our services around threat analysis, protection, and sometimes also making sure that we could safely restore client systems and restore what we call a minimum viable company, so the company could actually continue to work. So I would say these are also COVID phenomena. But then, of course, I can echo what Tove and Ilya have said, that, as soon as we had some confidence that we were resilient and that we could operate, our need for innovation skyrocketed, and the need for agility and for really using all these technologies that had been growing up, so to speak, but seemed small, the cloud, AI, blockchain, analytics, data platforms, all of these things now, got such a pull from the business as we hadn't seen before. And so this need for agility, for also standing up practical things quickly, I think is part of the new reality, and requires of the way we think about digitalization and IT as something that will drive innovation on a daily basis, and with flexible systems that allow us to do so. And we need that flexibility and agility in our systems, in our digital transformation, to engage not only in operations, but also with our customers, because they too are now remote. And as much as we care about our own people and their ways of working, we also need intimacy with our customers, both B2B and B2C, to understand the needs and to be able to respond to them. And so again, I stress this agility that we get with these new technologies in order to engage with customers and stay close with them, respond to their needs, and do the same with our workforce. And then the last point I would like to highlight is that of the resiliency we need, not just in our assets, but in the entire supply chains. So in fact, the whole value chain, got stress tested, and particularly the supply chain is great need for resiliency, because if you're serving a customer or you're on an asset, but you actually have no line of sight as to, for instance, the delivery date of a spare part, something breaks down in your supply chain, there too, we need this robustness and resiliency. So with that, I would say, thank God we had all these digital technologies at our disposal. Thank God we've proven that, there is resiliency in our IT and digital operations. And we greatly look forward to a future where there'll be more of that and close to our employees and customers.
Thank you, Sonia. And as you say, thank God for many things. But the challenge you referred to at the end about supply chains is also incredibly pertinent. The world is so globally connected. Supply chains are much longer and more complex and deeper than ever. And I think this, as you say, resilience has been stress tested. And in fact, many supply chains have been seen to not function as well as people expected. So terrific messages, real examples from all our speakers. Can I ask all the speakers to switch your cameras on now, as we're going to turn to the panel discussions, and of course hope that our technology continues to work as well as it seems to be so far. So if I could, I'm going to we'll have cameras on everyone in a minute. I just want to remind the audience, if you do have questions to our panelists, you can ask them by clicking the chat icon, selecting the Host Energy Institute from the drop down, and then typing in your question. And of course, I will try to include as many of your questions as possible in our discussion, although I'm going to first ask a few questions myself to the panel. And the first round we'll take in the same order, if we can, as the order that you spoke in. And I really want to come back to the impact of COVID on how you do business. And you've all touched on it a bit. You've talked about how it changes ways of working, the mass of information and data you've been dealing with. But could you say what the most significant accelerations of digital transformation have been in your businesses, and how that's going to really change your IT strategy if we look at, say, the next 3 to 5 years? And I was going to start with Michael. I'm not sure. I can't at the moment see everybody.
Yeah. I'm still here, Malcolm.
Good. Over to you, Michael.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, but looking 3 to 5 years into the future, I think at the right where we are now, we realized that we were already on a very digitally fused journey, you could say. So one of the things that we have been discussing is how much is it that we really take this COVID situation into account right now in our planning. We were quite I would say we were quite ambitious already, but as the examples today have also shown, perhaps the courage has been growing a bit, and it's been more natural to think about the digital possibilities as the natural solutions to stuff. We have discussions going on in the company that I'm in that sometimes digital is the right tool, but sometimes you just need to hire a couple of engineers instead doing the work. But with the constraints of the current situation, it turns into a more natural choice to look for digital solutions. I would say that in the phase that we're in now, I think still there's a lot to learn regarding the virtual work life. We were used to conducting physical meetings. We were used to travel a lot and bring people into contexts where decisions were made in a physical sort of surrounding. And I think still there's a lot to figure out how to do that in the best possible way going forward. It's probably not in a 3 to 5 years sort of outlook, but it's what's really important for us as a company now, making sure that we learn from this opportunity to learn and also embed it into the cultures that we sort of run the company on this CO2 in the end.
Thank you. Thank you. Tove, to you, and I know you touched on also the sort of remote operations, the remote inspection, how so much more is going to be done remotely.
Yeah, no, I think I can echo a little bit on Michael's points here. I think a digital agenda has been around for quite a while. We have quite a few very tangible projects we're working on. But I think what this has done is kind of a deep acknowledgement and realization in the whole organization, not only the young ones and kind of the right-minded in a way, if you could put it that way, the IT nerds or what have you. I think what we have seen in our company traditionally is that there is a generation split in the organization when it comes to digitalization. And with this home officing where we just had to, I think we leapfrogged when we went on home officing. I think that very many didn't know Teams at all. And in a matter of a couple of weeks, everybody was on Teams and managing very well and kind of going from situations where we had people traveling with 100, 150 travel days a year to now doing everything via your home office or your computer. That's a huge step change in our mindset. So I think we will see faster development in the digital arena with kind of even more tools. One of the last things that we actually just recently did was to use a drone to actually fly out a piece of equipment we needed to repair a lifeboat on one of our installations in the North Sea, rather than having to send people offshore. So kind of, I think the acceleration in the digital space is what we will see, and the buy-in from the whole organization rather than a part of it.
Yeah, no, I think that's very telling. And Ilya, you touched on a bit the same theme. So we can all see how, in a way, the professional designer work, the planning work, that end is easy to do remotely. But you also touched on how much the asset operations are moving quickly to being done remotely.
Yes, indeed. And I have like few examples. At Shell, as I mentioned, we at digitalization accelerated pretty much at exponential rate. Just now, so if you look 1 year ago, we had very few robots in the field. Drones were relatively novel, and now, Tove just mentioned, in Shell we have flown over 1,200 drone missions, and robots have conducted over 100 plus cleaning and inspection jobs. Our virtual rooms now powered by augmented reality increased the use of those rooms increased by around 600%. In terms of, and I already mentioned that we monitor 2,500 pieces of equipment globally. And of course, from IT strategy, it means even more acceleration of platforms. So we were working on data platforms, but now now we have AI platform. Now we are looking at, as I mentioned already, on digital twins to build all this data modeling and visualization in one place. And of course, that creates ability to access data and help operations from anywhere in the world.
Thank you. Thanks, Ilya. And Sonia, what's the most impressive thing you've seen in some of your partner companies where IBM's been helping this change?
Yeah, so I would say two things, and I think it echoes some of the things that one is the scaling of it, right? So it used to be sort of little pilots, minimal viable products, as we call it, and it didn't go anywhere, and now it scales, right? So you really get into this idea of platform, and then as Ilya was saying, not one platform. One platform is not going to meet your need. It's going to be multiple platforms that need to connect to each other. So the other concept I would offer is that of ecosystems. So some of the most fascinating innovation happens when partner companies actually connect the dots, and connect functions that you need in a particular workflow, or connect data that, when shared and connected, gets that much more powerful in terms of insight. So I would say scaling and ecosystems.
Thank you. That's very insightful. I'm going to switch subjects in a way. I mean, because we'll come back to this because there are questions coming in from the audience on the same theme. But I want to just switch to, we're all part of the energy sector, and we've all recognized the energy transition coming at us. But how do you think the pandemic has really affected the pace of the energy transition, and especially how might it affect your company's approach to it and how that will play out? And let's start, Tove, with you, if we can, please.
Thank you. I think we worked a lot on this in our scenarios, kind of trying to see this picture, and I think that one of our findings is that we will probably see some regional differences, where I think you would find that in some areas of the world we will embrace and accelerate the green shift and development towards energy transition. EU is a good example of that with their agenda, quite aggressive one, quite closely. But I also think that and part of those countries in regions like that will probably also use renewables being something you can build locally to redevelop or rebuild the economy with local content, etc. But when you look at the areas that will probably be much harder hit, I'm not so sure that we will see the same. I think that if other energy sources are cheaper, you might see that some nations will be forced actually to select cheaper energy, or the cheapest available. Can be, of course, renewables, but it can also be coal or something else. And I guess that parts in the world where we might see that is in Latin America, where that could be an example. And we also touched upon the supply chain. I think what we see now in terms of geopolitical games and trade wars between the US and China, for instance, can actually have a detrimental effect on supply chains worldwide and in forms of sanctions. So I think we will see both a mixed picture when it comes to the energy transition. And for our own company, I think we do have a very outspoken and aggressive change agenda. We will stick to that, I think, and very much work to grow our renewable leg.
Yeah, thank you, Tove. I think it's absolutely right to recall that though we sort of see immediately a global downturn in energy demand, and one might think, especially in, say, oil demand, because travel is so much down, actually the economic challenge is going to make the transition more challenging for quite a lot of countries, and it's good to remind us of that. I'll go to Ilya and then Michael for comments on this. Ilya?
Yeah, just to add to, as probably audience knows, Shell also has scenarios, and we looked at indeed what COVID brings to energy transition, and we think it could be a pivotal moment for meeting the goals of the Paris Agreement. Society was not on course to achieve the Paris goals before COVID-19, but there is a great awareness now that actions from government, people, and private sector can have a tangible impact. You can see how companies, governments get together and with one goal. And also, if you look at my company, Shell, in the middle of pandemic, Shell has announced our new ambition to be net zero emission energy business by 2050. And we see more and more companies make similar pledges. To be honest, exactly what Tove was saying, is that responses to the crisis will vary, but will be highly impacted by leading economies and countries with high population growth. And we'll see places where we'll have green recovery, where it's just indeed jumpstart to move to more renewables, but we also see that, of course, some areas will continue sticking with local environment.
Okay, thank you. And Michael, what's your perspective?
Well, I can more or less mirror what's been said already. We see in the markets that we are in that obviously the COVID-19 situation has preoccupied politicians and administrations. So some of the projects that we have ongoing has seen smaller delays from decisions that needs to be taken in administrations, and obviously there's also a problem with all these support packages coming out from government, spending a great deal of money that could have gone into combating climate change. I know the Danish situation most because that's where I live as a citizen also, and I do see that there is still a real demand from the public on the government taking the necessary steps to do things. So I think if you look into 3 or 5 years into the future, probably all the right things will be done. But right now there is sort of a delay in things. The good thing is, though, as Ilya also is pointing to, a lot of great corporations are doing magnificent things these days on switching to a carbon negative even profile. And I think the enterprises out there are also a big part of the solution. It's not just government, it's also enterprises who really wants the green energy and the renewables to come into play. So good stuff going on, but also delays, it seems.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to switch to a third question from me, and we'll do this one briefly because I'm getting some questions in now from the audience. But I'll start with Sonia on this, which is, in a way that we've all talked about how impressively so many companies have responded and actually maintained complex offshore operations, refinery operations, almost seamlessly, embracing new solutions to do that. But I think there's quite a lot of actual human downsides to what's going on that maybe don't manifest themselves immediately, but over time. Somebody touched on it's difficult to forge real teamwork for new teams and to bring on board newcomers to build new client relationships. But I'm also concerned about the inequalities between individuals, because for some people working at home is actually quite easy and uplifting, and for others it can be very challenging depending on individual circumstances. So I'm just curious how you think, if we roll forward a couple of years or more, how will the future of work play out and what will be different?
All right. Well, this is obviously a broad question, and that concerns us all. I think people are now individually feeling for themselves what are their needs in terms of me as an individual, how connected do I need to be? And then my work, how much connectivity does my work require? And perhaps this time gives us an opportunity to think about personalization truly. So in other words, how much physical proximity do I need, and how much do I prefer to work from home because it gives me concentration, or I don't need the travel, and I do the right by the climate by not getting on an airplane when I don't need to. So I see an age of personalization, and I also see, which is enabled actually by our companies, a new destination also for our offices, where these places will still very much be needed, but they will have clear purpose, in terms of getting together with clients or with teams. And then I also see something accelerating, which was there again before, which is that of absolutely continuous and fierce learning and reskilling on all the time, very much enabled by our digital tools, also by our remote connectivity, where you can get in touch on a very flat earth with any expert in the world. So in fact, personalization, a new destination for the office, and ongoing learning, I think are some of the things that we'll see in the future.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to see, is there any, rather than go around all the panel on this one, who's got their hand up first? And I'll come to you on this question of the human side. Tove.
Thank you. I'm not a digital ninja yet, I see, because I work from an iPad, and I'm sitting here clicking on my mouse on the computer, so it doesn't work. Okay. No, I think it was excellent answer by Sonia. I think that that the scope and the opportunity space here is huge. But there is something about kind of meeting and being social, and I think that that needs to kind of still be handled. For us, in addition, I think that you can do most of the work, it looks like, from anywhere. But there's something about how do you start new business, where we actually think that this kind of scouting, searching for new opportunities, like Michael also touched upon, how do you enter new areas without being there with boots on ground? That is something that might kind of change the way we think of our organizational setup going forward. We're a traditional kind of expat company where we send people abroad. That might change, I think. And the need for office space will definitely go down, but I think we definitely need to have some meeting places.
Thank you. Let me stay with that question, and I'm going to add to it a question from the audience coming in. I've got loads coming in, actually, more than I can get through. But Alan Burns' question, what's the medium term, say 1 to 3 year view on the need for business travel? For all sorts of reasons that you can imagine. You can dip it for so long, but will it come back to 100% of its previous level, 80%, 30%? And what impact might that have for energy demand? Who would like to put their hand up? Yeah, Michael, and then Ilya, and then Sonia.
I mean, it's a really interesting question. Technology is there, right? So we all done the Teams meetings, and we see that it's working out quite well. But there is, I think, that when this pandemic is over, that we sort of forget about it. In HQ, they seem to be meeting up in the meeting room again. And you can ask yourself, why is it that we have people traveling from London to Copenhagen and back during one day to have a 1-hour meeting in Copenhagen? Why are they doing that? And I think it's because they know that if they're not physically present in that meeting room, they'll miss out on some of the golden opportunities to network and to influence decisions, because I think you all try to sit in a video meeting as that guy in the screen and everybody else sitting in the room. It's completely difficult to have anything important to say or influence the decisions. So I think it's back to, if we really want to make a change in the traveling, we need to also make sure that the culture of meetings, not less, is changed. So in our company, we are trying to embed a sort of a paradigm which says that if you have one on Teams, everybody is on Teams, and it seems to be working. But will it also last after the pandemic? We'll need to make sure it does. But I think those kind of relations are there. So it's not about business traveling. It's really also about how you conduct sort of your decision processes and respect that if you want to be inclusive and have a real inclusive culture, you also need to change the way that you are working.
Yeah, I think that's actually, I personally have found that the Zoom meetings, the team meetings and so forth are in a way more inclusive. They involve, everyone learns better behaviors actually. And so meetings are less dominated by a few individuals with the loudest voices, but it is in a way a more democratic and inclusive process. Ilya and then Sonia, and then I've got a question I want us to get to around, remote operations, inspection and so forth. But
I was about to go there actually,
okay,
because that's kind of what I feel, that in operations, especially offshore operations, for sure things will change. We all know going there, it's a safety risk. Any additional person on a helicopter, on a boat, it's too much exposure. And why would you do it if you demonstrated you can do it remotely? You demonstrated you can call expert, and I'm positive that will continue.
Can I ask you, Ilya, because a couple of the questions have come in, have drilled into can you just say a bit more about, what digital twins means, but also, when you said 2,500 items of equipment, that sounds very impressive to do so quickly for automated monitoring and inspection, but presumably that's a drop in the ocean of the number you would need to do to be able to transform the whole enterprise.
So let me start from the last question first. So so we are monitoring a lot of equipment using people and physics-based models today. So we're monitoring rotating equipment, we're monitoring our pumps, generators. What those 2,500 pieces of equipment that we're saying is also critical equipment that we monitor now with AI. And yes, it's one of those things that we believe nobody else in the world has that many models yet. And last year we had maybe 50. And where we need to go, we want to get to 10,000s, maybe 20,000 of models. But important thing is that jump from 50 to 2,000, that what really taught us how to do it. And all the IT issues and monitoring issues, but now we know how to do it, and it goes exponentially. Interesting.
And Sonia?
Yes, and what was the question, Malcolm? What would you like me to respond to?
I'd particularly like, well, actually, I'll ask you another question. One of the themes is around the whole, we talked about meetings, but it's back to the enabling of remote operations asset management and equipment monitoring and control and so forth.
Yes.
The other actually that came in from someone is, what has IBM done on the supply chain issues? Because yours is probably one of the most complex and deep supply chains globally. How have you responded in a different way to add the resilience you talked about earlier?
Yes. Okay. So if we're moving from assets to supply chain, I think some of the capabilities that Ilya was talking about, they are quite similar, actually. It's really the capability to monitor in real time using the sensor data that come from everywhere, right? They're like dust in the air now, using that data to good purpose, right? So it really means setting up control rooms and knowing exactly what the condition is of something, where you need to intervene, when it's going to arrive, and so on. So that holds true but it also holds true for the supply chain, except that in the supply chain, you really need this ecosystem thinking, right? Because it is between partners. And I think that is where it gets more complex, because your ability to actually predict and intervene depends to some extent on the openness that you have, the visibility that you have on data that actually come from somebody else or maybe owned by somebody else. And so that brings me to this ecosystem that I was talking about earlier, because really you want to be able to see in somebody else's data. So you need this close collaboration and data exchange, which I called, platform connecting to platform, and you need to enable this ecosystem. And so that's why IBM is thinking about not just one cloud, but multiple clouds and multiple applications in multiple clouds that talk to each other.
Okay, I think that is the future. I'm sure of that. I'm going to ask Michael for one last word on cybersecurity, because I know it's an area he knows a lot about. And we must all worry that, as everything becomes so much more dependent on the digital world, can the operations be got at? Can the offshore platforms be interfered with in really disruptive ways?
Well, I cannot say no to that, obviously. I think it's an issue, and it's not an issue that's related specifically to COVID-19. Obviously, we have more people sitting outside of the perimeter of the office space working, but in many ways, we were already using technologies that weren't reliant on sort of the physical whereabouts when you talk about people working. But the other thing is that as we digitalize the assets, as we want to move into more sort of remote work and remote control of the assets, you'd also need to create and drill holes into that security that we had in the old days, where the assets were practically islands sitting with no access for people sitting on the outside. That's not the reality today. So you have a lot of our own people, but also third-party vendors with access to the assets. And it's a completely new situation for an industry that's not really digital.
Yeah, no, I think it is a real opportunity and, again, a threat. I'm going to draw this to a close now. I just want to say a few comments. I think we are in the middle of two seismic shifts. One's about digitalization, and the other is the energy transition. And it's clear that the pandemic has already transformed the way business is done far more than we expected. And the impact, the transformation there, the digital transformation is so much more than about conducting meetings on like this. It's really about leading organizations to change their business structures, their processes, their skills needs, their cultures to operate in a truly digital world. And of course, in parallel, we've got the interwoven challenge of climate change and increasing global energy supplies, which brings that seismic shift in the energy that all of our companies produce, store, distribute, and sell, and the technologies you need to do that. So it's a profound pair of changes that we have coming in the world, and we need to drive them and play our part in driving them at a pace that will ensure the world becomes a better place as a result, not a worse one. Thank you for joining. We've reached the end. Thank you for your excellent questions. Thank you to all our four great panelists. Thanks to Marta, Francesca, and our wonderful team who organized today. Thank you to IBM as sponsors. I just say that if you enjoyed listening today, look out for the other EI events. And I'd also encourage you to forward the links so that others in your organizations and among your colleagues and friends can see this on Catch Up. Thank you very much, and particular thanks to Michael, Tove, Sonia and Ilya. Thank you very much indeed. Bye-bye.